Look, I got the haircut.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our winter edition of BLATANT. My name is Ashara Ekundayo. I am an interdisciplinary creative arts practitioner and independent curator who is honored to be your host today. BLATANT is an ongoing forum and live zine series on art, joy, and rage that centers the lived experiences and radical imagination of Black women artists and cultural laborers creating across discipline and geography. Our ongoing BLATANT program is co-presented by the Museum of the African Diaspora and Artist as First Responder. It offers these unscripted and uncensored conversations as an acknowledgement of the lives of artists whose creative practices heal communities and save lives. And we view artists' lives as healers. We view ourselves as healers and our work as essential to our well-being. This episode will begin like every episode before, with an acknowledgement to the land from which we host these conversations. This evening, I'm joining you from the ancestral and contemporary homelands of the Anishinaabe Nation, which includes the Ojibwa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi, in the city now called Detroit, Michigan. I offer a land and people acknowledgement to really say that I ask permission as a guest to live upon and to create upon this land in service to those who have come before us and for those who are yet to come. And I offer an acknowledgement to my African ancestors who continue to guide and protect me and to protect us. We welcome them to this conversation, and I offer to them this cool water as a sign of respect. It has also become part of our opening ceremony to offer our deep breaths for our newly dead. So I'm inviting you now to take 3 deep breaths here, to ground yourself in your body, to allow yourself to become present with us for this next spell of time. And take a breath in. Just give yourself permission to arrive. Take in another breath. Offer yourself some forgiveness. Then take in another breath. Honoring those who have passed through the veil recently or not so recently, but that we remember them. We call them into our spaces of creativity. Because inside this forum, we sit honestly with our feelings of hope and loss and grief and joy and anger, and sometimes even indifference. So with all that said, greetings, Ricky and Erica. So glad to see both of you here at the top of 2022. Would you like to offer land acknowledgement and opening thoughts? Ricky?
This is my first land acknowledgement from LA. So I hope that I'm saying this correctly, but I am on Tongva land, which is unceded territory here in what we now call Los Angeles, California. It is with gratitude and deep reverence that I move in solidarity with the original people of this land, as well as my ancestors. So ashe to all of them. And thank you for inviting me today. I'm really excited to be in conversation with you and Erica. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Hello, my friend, Erica Deeman.
Hey, Ashara. Hey, Ricky. So I am on the land of the Duwamish people here in Seattle, and I am just here to acknowledge that I am on that traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and just honor with gratitude, the land itself, and the Dormish tribe, and also my ancestors who, you know, are following me as I kind of move around this planet, and kind of just honoring their journey and attending to the land that they resided on as well. So yeah, just super excited and grateful to be here today. Nervous as always.
Don't be.
Just within the space, you know, like we've had this conversation, we've had so many conversations before, so this is almost like a continuation, as opposed to something that's completely new. So viewing it in that way is a continuation.
Okay, I'll share for that. Well, let me just read a little bit of bio for both of you. Ricky, I'll start with a bio that I found of you, for you, about you. Ricky Weaver is a Michigan-based visual artist and photographer. During her undergraduate studies at Eastern Michigan University in Ypsilanti, Michigan, she became enveloped in the idea of double consciousness. She has created images and pieces based on personal experiences, hoping to generate a greater dialogue concerning race and gender. As a mother of 3 children, she has come to connect intimately with the mothers that raised her, and she is interested in shared narratives that exist within her community of Black mothers. Ricky received her MFA from the prestigious Cranbrook Academy of Art, and she is currently a teaching fellow at the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California. Ricky has shown her work in the 13th Havana Biennale, the Expo Chicago, the Black Studies Gallery at the University of Texas, Austin, and other places. Welcome, Ricky. Good to have you here with me and with Erica in the space.
Thank you.
And Erica Deeman is a visual artist whose work explores the intersections of race, gender, and the hybridity of Black identity. She is concerned with the multiple ways selfhood manifests through the transnational and hybrid modes, and how we find a sense of belonging and home through migratory patterns, memory, cultural and personal experience, and ancestral legacy. Her multidisciplinary practice embodies the complexity and transformational nature of Blackness. Erica holds a BA in Public Relations from the Leeds Beckett University, a BFA in Photography from the Academy of Art in San Francisco, and is currently an MFA candidate in art practice at the University of California, Berkeley, California, with plans to graduate in May. Hello, Erica. Hello again. It's good to have us here. I love reading bios, and I love kind of like the discomfort that comes when we hear someone read our bio. But you know, we wrote stuff that we also, we did it. We did that, you know, we're in the process of it. And we wrote it down, you know, so sometimes you just get to celebrate yourself. And I love reading bios. Many people, myself included, have recently found ourselves dealing with dis-ease on a very personal and visceral level, having contracted COVID and having had a real reckoning with their lives, particularly me and my life, my priorities, my perspectives. So I'd like to begin our conversation today asking about what feels pregnant and urgent for you in this moment, as much of the planet has been thrust into this new surge of COVID. So the question is, have your personal rituals and creative scholarship been impacted by this long grief of navigating isolation, sickness, and death? Erica, can you start off with some thoughts around it?
I mean, I have to exhale and breathe in and exhale. I mean, we have to embrace this time. And I think one of the things that I have been working with is embracing death, not in a way that becomes a comfort to me on this journey, that it's a place of acceptance. Now, not necessarily during this pandemic, but just this overarching acceptance of death as a not as an ending, but as a space of transition. You know, as like Ricky, you were talking earlier about the idea of it as a portal to another place, that it is not this finite moment. And so kind of with all of this being surrounded by so much death, I think that I have had to think about what death is in a greater way, and seek more active ways to enrich my life and live, as well as accepting death, if that makes sense. Kind of thinking about all of the things that I put in my body that I have control over, whether it is, you know, the food that I eat, this kind of the ritual of taking supplements that I have now. I probably take about 10, 15 tablets a day, you know, in order to kind of feel that I'm maintaining this optimum level, that I feel that I am in some way kind of enhancing my health. And especially as you get older, you know, you realize that this level of invincibility that you may have once had as a young 20-year-old in the club, you know, this is not the same place that you are, you know, as a 44-year-old person, you know, on this planet. So so yeah, I think that, you know, you know, really practicing and meditating has kind of helped me move through these dark times. Moving has helped me, you know, this aspect that I look out on, where I look through the trees, through water and onto mountain, has grounded me and has kind of helped me contemplate what we've been through. Just being able to put my feet on the ground has helped me. I kind of thinking, I think this time has made me look to the ground as opposed to look up. I felt that I wanted to find the dirt, this area that allows me to feel that energy coming from below as opposed to coming from above. And I feel that so much of the rhythm of my life before was of movement and of this kind of the transference downwards, as opposed to taking pause to feel the energy from below. So yeah, that's just some of the things that I found.
Ricky, this how have your personal rituals and creative scholarship been impacted by this long grief of navigating isolation, sickness, and death?
Yeah, very similar to, I could reflect a lot of the things that Erica was saying. Immediately though, it made me think about around this time last year, I was in Puerto Rico with some few artist friends. Y'all all know Andrew Wilson. And so I was with Andrew and a couple of our other friends. And one of the questions that was asked is this question here. It's like, you know, how has this really changed our practice? But it was specifically talking about the scale. And I remember responding to that because as a mom, like in isolation, and like there was no actual like going to the studio, like producing these objects, but I still felt the need to like be creative and make. And I said in that moment, the scale of the work is living. And I've been sitting with that over the last 12 months up until now, and really reminding myself that my first responsibility is to like be okay. So I've been doing a lot more moving my body in ways that help me to stay healthy, but also like encourage me to feel joy and express myself. Like this morning I was in here like jitting. I was like, dang, I just got back from Detroit. And like, so just like being really happy in those ways. So yeah, not being convinced that I have to be producing something materially and like participating in like really violent accumulation, like, and just being, as thinking about Erica's work, just like being, so yeah, trying to be present, trying to keep my feet on the ground, so.
Yeah, I'm appreciating what you're both offering here in terms of what it means to shift, you know, and to use the body, understanding that the body would be the site of revolution, the site, you know, of healing, and that we use this body to be artists as well, right? I'm wondering if you could add a layer to it, and I don't want to say complicated, but add a layer to your identity as Black women, and where there might be, you know, an edge that is added, you know, to the grief or the heaviness, or to the bliss and the joy, you know, this this identity that we hold, you know, that we are artists and creatives. We are Black women who are artists and creatives. Can you speak a little bit about that, you know, or if that's part of the conversation, you know, or if the Blackness and the identity part of it has dropped away, you know, in the last 2 years?
I mean, for me, I don't think I could ever drop away. I mean, you know, we are here creating worlds. You know, I can't help but think of all of the intellect that we have, that not even the magic, but the possibilities that we hold within our bodies, and kind of seeing that as a force. You know, as a Black femme identifying creative, you know, I feel that my work is in collaboration and in the lineage of all the others that have come before me. And though, you know, there's some definite kind of differences, you know, I'm obviously, you know, as we all are, you know, an immigrant on this land, you know, kind of searching for the space, or settling into this liminal space that I find that we exist in, or I exist in terms of my identity. Yeah, but just, you know, I just can't help but think of the people that have passed, you know, like bell hooks, and kind of moving through that space, and taking pause, and just honoring it, really, just honoring that space that she created for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, that layer has actually prepared me for this in some ways. It's like grief and death don't feel new to me. It feels, let me think through what I'm trying to say there. It feels like something that I've just been like born kind of like dealing with, like from a very young age. I can't even count the amount of homegoing ceremonies that I have been through. And like for folks who know my work, I usually am working from a place of like just trying to sort through grief. And some of the things that have been interesting is hearing other folks that don't identify as Black women say things like, it really sucks to have to like work so much and do all these things and not have time to care for myself, and all these like things that I feel like people are starting to realize in this pandemic, that I'm just like, that's been my life. Like that's been this life. And So that's been really interesting. But again, it's so funny because Eric and I are really similar, and I feel like I'm going to say this a lot, but I really can also say that I have, a picture of my grandmother in my room from her 100th birthday party, and she's like clapping her hands. I just caught it while she was clapping, and I kind of look at that every morning, and she's just encouraging me to keep going. I remember saying to her one day, like, I can't do this, I'm tired. And her face kind of changed from like, you got this, baby, to more like you tired, like you can do this. Like I raised 8 kids, I did this and that and all these things, and it really reminds me of the strength that I have to keep going and the reasons why I have to keep going. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just calling in the strength and the energy of our grandmothers and great grandmothers and siblings and loved ones, including Bell Hooks,
Right.
beloved ancestor, master teacher. Often in these conversations, these blatant conversations, when we are talking about artwork and artwork that's specifically made in the United States, we are simultaneously speaking about racism, anti-Blackness, white supremacy, racialized capitalism, all of the political underpinnings that run parallel, fueling the blatant truths of beauty and rage. And so, maybe we'll get into this during your presentations, but I'm wondering what current manifestations reflected in these times are making their way into your work. Like what's going on? Because we cannot separate, the present day moment from my present day making. Is there something new happening, based on the present day in your work right now? I mean, I'm thinking about you, Erica, because, I've watched you being a primary film to expanding your practice. And I'm wondering if some of that has been impacted, or influenced by the current time. Or if you're just like, I was working in photography and now I want to do this and this and this and this. I'm just, is there some tension there? Or is it just a curiosity?
I mean, there's definite tension there, Ashara. It's when I think back to the reason that I'm now kind of up here, on the unceded territory of the Dwarvish people versus full-time in San Francisco, I have to acknowledge that move was because of a diagnosis that my sister-in-law had, and we were so worried and concerned about the diagnosis that we moved our lives to be up here and to be closer to family, to support. And in moving land and having space, I have been reminded of the connection to the land that we have always had, that I have always had, but that I had forgotten about in I don't know, maybe in the swirl of day-to-day life. Maybe I didn't take time to pause. I didn't have time to pause. And maybe this time has been a pause and rest. And in this scary time and a scary diagnosis and a scary move, there has been a possibility created to think about, a connection to the land and to the people that have tended it before me. And, in moving and in having more space, that has definitely impacted my practice. To be able to grow something and plant it in the ground is something that I hadn't had since I'd moved from the UK. And so in a decade of not cultivating or having this growing practice, to be able to nurture something from a seed to then harvest, and to think about the lands that I am channeling through this intentional planting, whether it's, whether I'm seeking out these Haitian tomatoes, as well as these kind of cauliflower strains, as well as these okra, which I managed to grow okra in Seattle.
That is quite a feat.
It is, and so then
environment, the atmosphere needed to grow okra is not what I would think Seattle offers.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so then, my practice is now looking at, climate activism and climate change because of where I'm at right now, and thinking about these catastrophes as catastrophes and possibility. Like, what are these new forms that may open in the face of catastrophe? Like, can we find something in that space that can keep us going? And I think that my practice is thinking about that more. It's thinking about current and future possibilities, as well as ancestral connection. So I feel like it's almost like this collapsing of time that's happening in my practice, as opposed to just other investigations that I was having. If that kind of, that sounds like a massive swirl, but
let's dig into it when you present. But Ricky, I want to hear, if the current times are like making their way. I want to hear what the hell are you mad about? I was like, y'all, Jim, we're having this very proper kind of conversation, but I want to invite you all to loosen up. What are you mad about? Because this is some absolute insanity we are living through, and brilliant Black women and Black artists are speaking to the times. I want to know what you're mad about. Because, we've had some other conversations before we got to this conversation today. I was like, so I think the three of us represent like 3 different decades of age. I want to know what you're mad about. How's it show up in your photography?
So I actually go through this like thing where I'm like, I'll make some photographs and then I'll be like, I don't know what a photograph is. And then I just freak out and I start trying to like refigure out the way that I'm thinking about a photograph. And so when you asked the previous question, I was just like, oh, I was shopping for like casket handles in bulk yesterday. So I guess there is some things for some work that's happening in my studio. But I'm like, I guess there are some things that are happening right now that are finding their way into the studio. And I think one of the things, now that you asked me that I'm kind of mad about is just that, like, I have to try really hard to not be mad. I have to say things to myself like, being angry is an easy emotion. Being mad is easy. Let's figure out how we can feel this anger and then move through it so we don't stay there. Because I imagine, and in the pit of my stomach, I feel like I gotta take a vacation to go be mad, because once I feel all of that, then maybe it requires some time to say, damn, I guess I'm mad that I don't have time to like really be fully mad, like throughout my day, and just like managing like the emotional management of my children and trying to like manage things from here in LA while they're like in Michigan, and just, like, I don't know, I feeling out of time, I guess. That's a thing that kind of pisses me off. I don't really like to be mad though.
I mean, I think it's a thing. I mean, I'm using anger as just, it could be rage, but I mean, I mean, there's something to be said about being up and coming, emerging, established artist. And there's something to be said about having a particular kind of conversation when you're at a museum, you know, and how our public presentation is expected to sound, not that it has to sound, but, you know, Black women are known to utilize our rage and our anger in very creative ways. And the idea that we're thinking about how not to be mad or how not to present that we're mad or not show that we're mad has everything to do with kind of like the structures of the academy and institutions that we are operating inside of as professional artists. You know, and where we think that will get us if we're perceived as angry Black women on the canvas, behind the camera, on the page, whatever that looks like, whatever your creative practice is. So I'm going to try to return to that question around rage. Erica, you're not off the hook.
No, I mean, I was gonna come in and kind of just like, you know, Vicky, what you were saying really resonates with me. Like this, like for me, I've been thinking about this, the idea of releasing the anger, because I recognize that holding it in makes us ill. Like the anger is a cancer, and we have to express it. And the reason why they don't want us to express it is because they understand the power of a quietened anger residing in the body. Like we have to get this anger out. However we get it out, it needs to remove itself from our bodies. And it makes me think of Audre Lorde's The Uses of Anger essay. You know, it's like how we channel that anger. And for me, you know, I'm like, you know, I have to expel it every day, you know, whether it's in my yoga practice, whether it is a hard workout, whether it's a walk, whether it is in the making of the creative work that I'm doing, I have to release it. And I mean, I'm angry with academia and its violence, and how so many of our Black women intellects are passing early because of that violence. That makes me really angry that place is a place of violence and has such impact on our bodies. And I'm angry with social media. I'm angry that we are expected to provide content to these platforms. I'm angry. Yeah. I'm angry that we now cannot comprehend something without it being seen, or the guilt that one may carry because one has not shared something, or promoted it enough, or, you know, that makes me angry, because sometimes I just want to think about the work or make the work and not have to provide content.
Mm-hmm.
And
you have to sit and figure out what your smart piece is. You're like,
yes.
I can't just have a post. It has to be, you know, well thought out and curated in a very different kind of way.
And then after you post it, like you're like, keep checking to see what it's doing. Like I was like, the last 2 days I don't even know where my phone is right now, and that feels really great. And I archived all like 3,000 images that I had on my Instagram, and it feels really good. I have like 2 posts right now, and it just feels really good to be rid of that.
Erica, you wanna show us some of your work and talk about it for a bit?
Yeah, sure. Let me bring it up here. Here we go. Let's start it here. You know what? I kind of prepare. I really did prepare. And now I feel like I want to be a little bit looser with it, but kind of, you know, Ashara.
You know, that's totally fine. That's just fine.
Yeah, I know.
I want to see, but you don't have to give your professor a presentation or your.
Thank you. I appreciate
Girl,
that.
I was like, do your thing.
Okay, well, you know,
We're
I
on
think
mute. We're on mute. You have the stage. Carry on.
Okay, well, I think what I wanted to do was to kind of really talk about some of the work that's been flowing out of me in, you know, the past year and a half, 2 years, and you know, just that whole conversation that we just had, reflecting on the times that we've just been through, and just kind of feeling super grateful for having, you know, space to incubate, you know, from friends and collaborators, and a gallery that has kind of really not provided any external source of pressure to produce. And I'm just so grateful for that space, and just for also for my degree space, for my cohort, you know, having, you know, sharing this work that is on screen now at an award, the Murphy Cadogan Award, which is for first year graduates in the Bay Area. It's an award system where, you know, there's the Cadogan Award and the Murphy Award, and it's all grad students. And I just feel so grateful for that space, for that incubative space that's been given to me. So yeah, I kind of, you know, since 2018, 2019, like, you know, you visited me up at the Headlands, Ashara, you know, I've really been interrogating my relationship to photography as this kind of primary output in my practice. And that has kind of been in conversation with my becoming on this land, and kind of thinking about, you know, the teachings of Stuart Hall. Like, I have this quote here that he had on identity, and kind of identity is not only a story, a narrative which we tell ourselves about ourselves, it is stories which change with historical circumstances. And identity shifts with the way in which we think and hear them and experience them. Far from only coming from the still small point of truth inside us, identities actually come from outside. They are the way in which we are recognized, and then come to step into the place of the recognitions which others give us. Without the other, there is no self. There is no self-recognition. And so kind of Stuart Hall kind of really informed so much of my thinking. And this idea of kind of non-fixed liminal spaces, and my relationship to the photograph, it's kind of really been amplified during this time. And I really kind of love photography, but I kind of want to see it and have this discourse with it where it is not the only means for me to kind of share and create in. And so as we are looking at something now, we're looking at a site-specific installation with this neon sculpture sitting on the wall. And so I kind of began to think about, you know, the physical presence of the body in works that we make, not necessarily per se this kind of visible presence of the actual body, this figurative presence, but the suggestion of the body. Is it the hand, this kind of remnant, the imprint, this accumulation, this kind of build up, this knowing and unknowing that can sometimes be felt in work. And so kind of being here for a decade, like making these portraiture projects, you know, I wanted to kind of think about it in a different way, and kind of reflect back to myself. And I feel that, you know, the work that I've made so far has kind of granted me community and these spaces of sharing. And I kind of wanted to turn back and see myself from a different vantage point. Yeah, so this piece here, I mean, it's a simply titled piece, Being, and I want to give a bit more information about it. So it is, it's a neon sculpture. It is 6 inches by 10.5 inches. So it's a relatively small piece. The wall that it sits on is 8 foot by 10 foot. The script, the writing is my own, and which has also been fabricated. And the light emanating from it is on this like dimmable transformer, which is again really important for me to have these creative choices within the work. And the background is something that I created site specific. So I have some installation shots of me creating the work. And it's a mix of plaster of Paris and this earth that I traveled down from the Dwarmish territory here in Seattle. And so I kind of mixed the plaster of Paris and the soil, and then hand painted it onto this plywood, which was attached to this movable wall. There's no way Soma Arts were going to let me do this directly onto the wall. I was like, come on, and they were like, no, you have to provide this protective barrier. And so I started thinking, Ricky and I were talking about language itself and how in many ways this language that we speak is almost insufficient in many ways to articulate the vastness of our experience as Black people, as the Black diaspora. And so I started to think about language and then kind of reflect on how a single word could be a poem, or could it be something else? Could it be like this existential way of thinking? Can a word be slippery or liminal in a way? And at the time I was reading the Cuban Jamaican writer Sylvia Wynter's work and thinking about this and her thoughts on the comprehension of what it means to be human, and how these Western hegemonic constructs of man have erased the stories that came before. And so what are these possibilities of invention and the stories that we can narrate to ourselves and create these lands and these spaces ourselves? And so I started to think about, my family's journey. So, my family are the Windrush generation. They came from Jamaica to the UK in the early 60s. And, it kind of marked this seismic shift for the Caribbean diaspora. There was this movement to what was known as the motherland. And how people were received when they arrived in the UK, and kind of thinking about this idea and this notion of arrival, and kind of building this kind of parallel to my own journey. So if I am the first generation from the UK and I have moved to this country, then there's definitely this conversation that we are having in terms of this learning of culture. And, I was also reading this book called Journey to an Illusion by Donald Hines, which was published in 1966. Was the date it was published, and it has all of these interviews from people arriving as part of the Windrush generation, and these stories that were told, these kind of highly racist interactions, and having had these invitations to come to a particular country, and then to find out that you're not really wanted there, and it kind of made me reflect on, on my own existence, and whether I was kind of part of this kind of multicultural mirage, and maybe in leaving, it kind of became more clear for me to see that. So yeah, so kind of, I feel like I'm swirling around on this, but because this family story and story as, as kind of almost feeling like it was lost or not shared. And so, this book by Donald Hines kind of helped me speculate about the story of my family and the time that we had during lockdown, also kind of gave me time with my mother to open up that door and the conversation to learn, and for her to share some of the early memories and recollections of kind of moving to the UK. And, you know, just like the simple things like discovering that no one would sell them a house when they wanted to kind of purchase a house. And when my grandmother passed away, there was this reluctance to kind of sell this property, and I couldn't quite understand it until I realized, and she told me this story of how difficult it was to kind of obtain it, and to kind of then understand why it was such an anchor for the family, and why there was this hesitation in letting it go. Yeah, so, you know, I see this kind of this mixture of memory and place. You know, the plaster of Paris, with this kind of really checkered history, this extraction, its use within, you know, the Western art practice, and then this kind of restriction of it on my body when I was 4 years old, and I broke my arm. And this kind of really traumatic memory of breaking my arm, but also kind of being forced into this restrictive place with it. And, you know, around the time that I broke my arm, it was the ceremony of Prince Charles and Lady Diana and their wedding. And I really remember having to wear this dress with my arm under the dress because the cast wouldn't fit in, and kind of this feeling of humiliation, and this kind of loss of agility, and kind of using this material as a reminder of that, but also of this kind of possibility and of a movement through. And kind of also thinking about that time as a reminder of a history that I did not know, and of a language that I couldn't really express at the time. You know, in 1981, there were the Brixton riots, which was a direct response to racism in the UK and police brutality. And at the same time, there is this like colonial ceremony, and then there is this breaking of my arm, and then there's also this soil from the place that I am now tending, all kind of mixed in and providing structure.
Erica, can
Yeah,
I advance on to
yeah,
the next
yeah. Let's keep going. Okay, sorry, I feel like I'm waffling away. The familiar stranger work, you know, really is kind of like this space where I kind of see this collapsing of time and of medium. This is an image from my show, which happened in September of 21 at Anthony Meyer Fine Arts. And, you know, much of this ideation was formed out of the headlands. And it makes me think and reflect on the gift of residency and creating space with no expectation. It kind of makes me think about, Ashara, what we are actually doing with Black Space Residency, and that gift of space. And so this body of work consists of like 15 portraits, and kind of has this blurring of the landscape and the portrait. What is a photograph? What is a sculpture or something else? The past, present, and future, and vice versa. Yeah, and so, you know, I started off by creating these portraits. I created around 60 portraits in isolation, really. And it's so interesting to reflect back to that kind of self-inflicted isolation versus the isolation that we are now kind of faced with in reality, and is more institutional. And kind of having this desire to see myself, having this desire to kind of have an abstraction of myself, and kind of thinking, you know, back to what we were talking about, Ricky, about the photograph as as an existing abstraction, it is part of something else, always. It is never the real thing. It is always in isolation. And we can always question it in so many ways.
Can you talk about this material, Erica?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is like a Cassius obsidian clay. It's a relatively volatile clay. And it requires 2 firings, so it only turns black on the 2nd firing. And with these self-portraits, I pull them into 3D printing software, and I really wanted to experiment with technology and kind of thinking about these items as future artifacts. The idea that in these kind of abstractive visions, you can see the gradation that happens when the filament builds each 3D printed portrait, and that these in many ways almost appear map-like in this kind of topological geographical way, and how that kind of sits with identity, these kind of questions of sediment. Are we this buildup? Are we the sediment? And let me just move on to this image here. And kind of seeing the clay as this unifier between my body and the land. The clay is a Californian clay. It's not a natural occurring clay, but it is mixed in California, and kind of seeing this connection with my body and the land. And also kind of thinking about it as a map in many ways. And kind of thinking about the diasporic journey, and whether these pieces kind of speak to this idea of becoming and belonging and back to the land and our relationship with it. And these kind of shifting plates, like, these kind of mountainous regions and these gorges alike. And there was something deeply satisfying about kind of creating these like random shapes within the work, and how in many ways the photograph and its 4 corners kind of felt so restrictive, and in kind of creating these almost shard-like visions, there was room for movement in the pieces. And then kind of just quickly touching on some work that I feel like everyone has seen before. So kind of moving back to my portraiture. This is an installation view from the Institute of Contemporary Art in San Jose, where we created this brown space for this body of work for the Brown series, and kind of thinking about this interrogation of the portrait, of the photograph as object, of the surveillance that the photograph has been used as this tool of violence, and subversing it to create these kind of in-between moments, these pauses. I see them as these moments of reflection, and thinking about the conversations that this space allowed me to have, and this kind of shared Blackness, and some of these extraordinary moments that happened within this space. And I created this in my living room. I created the Familiar Stranger series in my kitchen during lockdown. I would be driving, I would get a friend from the studio complex to pick up the pieces in the car, and then I would bike over behind and then unload them at the studio complex, and then fire the pieces. And so my home has become this source of creation. These images were made in my living room, when I just graduated. And so the space became this really kind of precious space of sharing. And so many of the people that I worked with, I mean, this is Jacquees, who is a master voguer, choreographer, just extraordinary person. You know, we would come into this space and share our stories and commune together on the wonder of Blackness. And whew, I mean, thinking about how you can construct an image so you feel that you are truly in a collaborative space, that the, you know, choosing this background close to my skin color, and then this catchlight in the eye, which is my own reflection, kind of really trying to feel that I was not just behind the camera, but kind of holding space and kind of being with, in the truest way, within this image. And then this is Marvin. And so many, you know, people arrived as strangers and kind of left as friends. And I feel that, you know, as someone new to the States, that both the Silhouettes Project and the Brand Series kind of was a space to build community and collaboration. Am I nearly at time, Ashara? How am I doing?
Yeah, you're at time, but let's see what you have left to show us.
Okay, well, I have these installation images from the show at Banff in 2017, and what I particularly love is this is the reflection as well, that's kind of coming back from the polished concrete, which, you know, is you know, completely by chance. But, you know, kind of sharing this work as a complete series, and kind of, again, just thinking about this space for Black women, this kind of delicate intimacy, the idea of the shadow holding the information, the idea of darkness as the power, kind of really shines through in this work for me. And yeah, this is where I want to end. I felt like I really went off script. I had so much prepared, and then I was like, no, I'm just gonna fly by the seat. And then I wished I hadn't. But there we go.
I mean, we just get to be with that. Ricky, do you have some thoughts, reflections, or something you want to offer? I took a couple of notes, but I want to hear what you have to say.
One of the things that I was thinking about, Erica, while you were talking, is that this feels like like being here with you in conversation with like this other Black woman who's like a photographer, who is not discounting how much the physical body is a part of that process. You talk about the physical body a lot, and that was really beautiful to me. And the other thing that, you know, we've talked a couple of times, and I didn't really catch how you've been working with this domestic space almost through this kind of like urgency of having to make. And I found that also really beautiful as someone who works in the domestic space. And the other note that I took when I was looking at the wall that you were making, and then you moved on to these portraits, and the way that you talk about your medium and coming undone. And it's almost like you yourself, like in identity and all these things, like get to come undone in these really like beautiful ways in your work. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Ricky. Thank you.
One of the things that struck me, Erica, about what you were saying was about this idea of moving to the motherland, you know, and the motherland being England, not somewhere on the continent of Africa. And I was like, oh, here we are. Okay, so we touch in this conversation on immigration and migration and colonization, what that and a colonial and a colonial mindset, you know, around who is the mother, what is the mother, what is the location and the place of the mother. So the privilege of that kind of conversation, you know, not all immigrants have. And, you know, because you and I have had lots of different conversations that you know, sway into, you know, the privilege of being a British citizen, you know, someone who is considered, you know, a citizen of the United Kingdom, and what, you know, what that means in the United States, you know, how that shows up in your work. One of the other things that struck me was this kind of self-inflicted isolation versus a forced kind of like societal isolation or quarantine or shelter in place, and the power and the utility of self-imposed isolation inside of the idea of residency. A few times you've mentioned the Headland Center for the Arts, which is, for folks who don't know what that is, you know, it's a really beautiful space up in Marin County that sits facing the beach, you know, facing the Pacific Ocean, next to a place called Rodeo Beach. Again, it's ancestral land of the Ohlone people, the Chichenyo and Ramatash Ohlone folk. We can have another conversation about that, but I'm just thinking about the self-imposed isolation. And then there's one other thing. It has something to do with like access to what is not readily occurring, like what is not natural, like having access to that, that you spoke to. So, you know, Ricky, as you present, I'm going to keep, you know, meditating on those thoughts, but I wanted to know if you wanted to offer any extra, particularly to that thought around going to the motherland, you know, being part of the African diaspora, you know, having your ancestors be placed in the Caribbean in a place that we now call Jamaica, and then going to the motherland and it being England and it not being Africa. Like, wow, I just went to that. How does that show up in your work? Yes, no, how does that show up? Does it show up? Or it's another conversation over a bottle of wine? I'm just, I'm wondering.
Is this?
It's to you. I mean, it's you,
to me. So I mean, I'm like, wait a minute. I think motherland is in inverted. I think that, you know, it's this kind of perfect colonial storm. It is education. It is where you believe your home is. And for so many people at that time, I think that they thought that the home was the UK. I mean, and that it's a crazy thing to kind of reflect upon. I think that for me and my work, I think it's this kind of refinding this reconnection to the different story, the story that I was never told, and kind of finding those archives that allow me to think about this collective diasporic story, this Caribbean diaspora, and also African ancestry, because that story is not something that education will tell us. And so for me, moving here has probably opened me to find those connections, because I think it's so different. Blackness is different in the United Kingdom than it is in the States. Like
It is.
That's a full stop. It's just different. It is different. And so
all of Europe, just
for sure. I mean, all of it. So
yeah. Thank you for your vulnerability around that. Because it's something to think about that. I mean, I've been studying both of your work for a while now. I know that much of it centers around home and belonging and the diaspora. So being part of the African diaspora evokes feelings of belonging everywhere and nowhere. So I'm just wondering around if you have found some solace in that, your thoughts around the making of artwork. It's not a question that we have to answer right now. I'm just thinking about how I thought about your work and why I wanted to be in conversation with the both of you as part of this. Ricky, are you ready to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Show us? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We're on mute now. You have the stage.
All right. Okay. Can y'all see my notes? No, you don't see them, right? Okay, cool. After talking with Erica the other day, I selected these images that we're going to look at based on this conversation, because I think this is like being in conversation with someone who is thinking about being in conversation specifically with like a Black woman who's thinking about photography or an image making more specifically in the same way. It's just been really great. And one of the things that we were talking about, as Erica mentioned earlier, is the photograph being this really incredibly kind of abstract object. And, maybe it's the first object we think about when we're talking about images, but an image by definition is just a representation of something. And so I like to think about the photograph as just one of the many materials that can hold an image. So that being said, I wanted to start with this piece from 2018 titled Amazing Grace, because this is when I really started to understand that I was more interested in the image and what it was pointing to by way of the photograph than the photograph itself. This is also around the time that I started using the term image-based artist as a title in place of photographer. I just remember getting really annoyed when people would be like, this photographer. I'm not annoyed by it now, but it was just like me, trying to figure out who I was with my medium and stuff like that. And so I make that distinction because when I'm looking at a work like this, there's this archival print, there's this black plexiglass with some text on it. There's a title that's a hymn. And so I think about all of these things as images that are pointing to a whole other host of images or archives. For example, because we were talking about bell hooks earlier, this quote here on the plexiglass, "Not only will I stare, I want my look to change reality," is a bell hooks quote. But I learned this quote through Simone Brown's text, Dark Matters, on the surveillance of Blackness. And so just even with those words, I'm pointing to radical Black feminism and dark surveillance. And, there's the title, it's a hymn, and that's supposed to be this, well, it is the sonic component. That's another method of pointing and evoking a specific kind of state. And then, even putting quotes around that for me is referencing a collective or a chorus that I feel is present in the lineage of this object. And the thing is, I don't think that you have to know all of that stuff. I don't think you have to know exactly where these words come from. or where the titles come from. I don't think you have to know all the specific details to be able to access the work, which is another point that I try to make in my practice. You know, I love the saying, if you know, you know, because I believe even if you don't know that, you know, you still know. And so one of the other things that I was thinking about during making this work was epigenetics or blood memory or rememory or whatever you want to call it, but the fact that our bodies get to hold and transfer these experiences, which is like those things I will also call images as well. And that those things are also like information and languages to me. And I believe that we have like dormant languages in our bodies, like waiting to be activated. So, you know, we were talking about movement a lot too, and there's a reason that we're seeing more people participating in the technology of movement as medicine. Like we're learning and recalling these things that we maybe already know. And one of my favorite quotes from Frantz Fanon is, a man who possesses a language as an indirect consequence owns the worlds expressed and implied by that language. And the images that we're seeing here is from the body of work is called Parables of Light. And one of the major inquiries in that work is, what are the worlds expressed and implied by the language of Black women's everyday practices? And I like to believe that these are worlds that don't require escape. You know, I think a lot about subtle refusal in my work. And any kind of refusal or flight requires a specific kind of belief and freedom. I'm about to go on a tangent. So anyway, in this piece, we have an image of me kind of addressing a tension in my back by holding myself and locating a site of discomfort with my hands. And then we have the scripture that says, faith without works is dead. And then the title of the piece is a quote that says, I had a praying grandmother. And there's something happening between like the title and these objects that I'm interested in. Like seeing them together, I get to think about like, yeah, my grandma was praying and faith is required for prayer, but like, what is faith without work? And in some ways, I'm really trying to acknowledge like the labor that my grandmother or our ancestors, because like in a way, like I say grandmother a lot, but I'm thinking about the ancestors and like the labor that was required for them to activate these prayers and see like a lot of things made manifest. So like that's a component. And then the other thing is like the back as a metaphor, like the back as a metaphor for a lot of things. And for these things to kind of just happen, it was important for me to like really simplify this image and put as least information as possible so that the figure in the image gets to be complex and there's room for speculation and ideas. And for me, that leaves room for possibilities. You know, I like to think about when I was really little, not really, whatever, when I was younger and the church was around the corner from my grandma's house, and me and my mom and my aunts and like my grandma, like we all went to the same church. We all came to Granny's house after church. And I would hear one of my aunties being like, that was for me. That sermon was for me. And then I'll hear like one of my uncles like, you know, I feel like he wrote that just for me. And I would just be like, how does that work? You know, like, how did everybody get exactly what they needed from this one thing that was the same? And so I think about that a lot when making work. And one of the things that I try to do is have various entry points and thresholds in the work that really allow for that. So I've been really more in the practice of like pointing to things. Because yeah, I think Erica also touched on this too, but one of the major, like one of the things that happens for me with photographs is like time changes. Ashara, you mentioned earlier, like how is right now affecting your work? And like this work was one thing when I made it, it's one thing today, and it's going to shift as time shifts. It's just yeah, I just, I love to think about time. I think that, you know, images have so much to do with time. And so this is an untitled installation from a show that I did in 2019. It was a solo show, and this was just kind of when you walk in the door. And the title of the show was Closer to God. And this piece, this here is like all about like pointing and portaling and just having access to like many archives. Cause like for some people, these are peppermints, but for other folks, this is church candy, you know? So like I'm pointing to like somebody, auntie trying to unwrap the candy while the preacher preaching and like be quiet. And then like, I can see me and my cousins underneath the pew playing tic-tac-toe on like the church bulletin. And I start to be able to like hear the choir and feel that like weird carpet on the pews. Oh yeah, this one of my favorite things was the blue magic hair grease, because I feel like people reacted to that object the most. And it's just like, yeah, I know you can see the hot comb, you can smell the edges frying on Easter Sunday morning. And so I actually like keep this blue magic in my studio. It's so great. And like the magic of all that is that we get to be in all those places like at one time. And so if you ever heard me say something ridiculously academic like spatiotemporal collapse, like this is what I'm talking about. Like Tina Camp, she writes about it in this beautiful way. She calls it the grammar of Black feminist futurity, and she calls it that which will have had to happen. I love that. That which will had to happen. You know, that's the past, present, and the future all like colliding in this moment. It's like she's almost talking about Black feminist futurity. It's omnipresent. And that makes me feel pretty incredible as a Black woman. And so this is a piece from that same show titled Shall Not Perish But Have Everlasting Life. It's 7 by 2 foot piece of plexiglass that's referencing a gravesite. And I don't know why I'm saying this, but it feels really important. This show opened the weekend of my grandmother's birthday. And so it's just over a year after she had transitioned. And so through making this work, I was thinking a lot about grief and death. And this investigation really helped me to start thinking about living differently. Because like, if time is nonlinear and energy can be created or destroyed, then death is literally a portal. So I was asking myself, what does it look like to live when you're not afraid to die? Like when you're really not afraid. Like I had been talking the talk, but I wasn't walking the walk. Like I'm like, yeah, my ancestors, ashe. But like I was like, it was just something starting to click after I had lost someone so close to me where I really just couldn't accept, because I didn't need to, you know what I mean? That like, no, she wasn't gone. Anyway, I digress. So, you know, I was asking myself, what does it look like when we're not afraid to die? And this was also at a time where like anytime I'm accessing any type of media, there's some type of video or article about a Black person being killed. And there was so much grief and anger and rage and sadness in that. And this really helped me to remind me that our ancestors were like right where we needed them to be. And so kind of what I was saying previously is like, there's a difference in understanding time as nonlinear and then experiencing that. So I was thinking about that a lot in these images here, because there's me now observing these images, there's me in front of the camera, and then there's me behind the camera at different times. And then at the same time, I made this work for a group show in Virginia titled In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, We Built Armor. And my beautiful friend Mahari, who curated the show, asked all the artists to work from one of Alice Walker's feminist prose from In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. And this work was inspired by a quote that reads, "They forced their minds to desert their bodies, and their striving spirits sought to rise like frail whirlwinds from a hard red clay. And when those frail whirlwinds fell and scattered particles upon the ground, no one mourned. Instead, men lit candles to celebrate the emptiness that remained as people do who enter a beautiful but vacant space to resurrect a God. And so I forgot to add the titles to my slide, but these images are named after some scriptures that are talking about putting on the armor of God. This piece is called the breastplate of righteousness, having on the breastplate of righteousness. This piece is gird about my loins with the truth. And this piece is shod my feet in the preparation of the gospel of peace. I don't know if y'all have noticed, but I work in threes a lot. I just intuitively started doing it when I was in undergrad, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm referencing past, present, and future, which is funny because I didn't realize the way that I'm really like referencing past, present, and future, and also spirit. And at the time I was thinking Father, Son, Holy Spirit, but like as things have shifted, that's not exactly what I'm thinking. So I'm actually, my train fell off the track. I feel like I forgot a chunk of something that I was gonna say. And now I'm about to sound like the lady from A Wrinkle in Time who can only talk in quotes. But I do wanna offer another quote as I'm gonna close out with these images, because Alexis Pauline Gumbs is the I don't even know, Alexis is so amazing. I don't even know Alexis in person, but anyway, like just reading Alexis's writing, Alexis taught me about nonlinear time, and Alexis taught me that like freedom is not a secret, it's a practice. And so the best way for me to really kind of talk about my work in a whole, like something that all of like since I heard about this book, I heard about M Archive on a podcast, and me and my homegirl, Lorena Cruz, was like waiting for the book to drop. Like it's that good. I don't ever remember like waiting for a book to drop. Like, oh my God, when is the book coming out? And I'm in a different place now, but I was navigating like being in grad school, having these kids. I had my son, my first semester, I had a C-section, and it was hard, yo. And people were just like, you're so incredible. Like, you're so amazing. And I'm like, I'm kind of dying. Like, that's not what I need in this moment. I remember making a piece that just says abracadabra bitch, and it was on Black Girls and Magic, because I was like, this is not the life. But anyway, the quote reads, if you think you would have survived without the love of a fat Black woman, you are wrong. If you say it, you are lying. You have blocked them out of your memory. It is because you don't want to know the meaning of necessary. You have failed them at the same moment you have failed the planet, which is every moment. Say it. Say the name of the fat Black woman who processed your paperwork, or fed you, or cleaned something in which you would have slipped. Say it before you die in your own filth. How dare you? How dare you say that that means lazy and sloppy and wrong? Who cleans? Who works all the time while you are sleeping and hating yourself? Who fixes everything you don't know how to? You are a liar, and you are a mess, and you are allowed to be a mess because of the unending work of the fat Black woman. Fat Black woman specifically, and you allow yourself to be a mess because you tell yourself, whoever you are, at least I'm not a fat Black woman. Even if you are a fat Black woman, you have lied and said you weren't, or compared yourself to something else. It's failure, it's a lie from the devil, it will never work. It is killing us all. How many statues of fat Black women do the ancients have to hide for you to dig up to understand what God looks like? And so that's it. Oh, I love this book so much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so much of that. A couple of the notes that I'm thinking about are, faith being unseen, and the work of Black women is very much seen, and that we root our spell casting, our ability to like make things happen in faith, So there's this transference Definitely shout out to Tina Kemp, because that whole temporal collapse piece is, this other way of speaking into what you were saying around Black feminist futurity being a paradox. Like, it has to happen. Like, it would not happen. It had to happen that way for it to manifest in the way in which we have access to it. So this idea of there is no time. Time is an illusion. So we hear that, we see that, we understand that a lot. And this idea of you moving in triptych without, knowing that that's the way that you were presenting your work, yourself as theorist, yourself in front of the camera, behind the camera, in technology, the technologist as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have one question, Ricky, about your actual process. Do you shoot film or do you shoot digitally? Do you actually go into the dark room and deal with the chemistry of photography?
So that's really interesting, because I've been really in conflict about this. I do both. No one ever really sees my film images. And I had convinced myself some time ago that I was out of time. I didn't have time to be in the dark room. Once my daughter got a little bit older and I just was doing all these things, I don't have time to be in the dark room. But there's something really magical about that experience always to me. And so I don't know. I think in the past couple of years, the images that I've been shooting on film have been feeding me and so much for my soul. And not that my other work is not, but sometimes I'm thinking about making work, whereas I don't want to think about making work when I'm in this romance with this film and this chemistry and this magic and these accidents. And I mean, sometimes I'm also just way too much of a control freak and perfectionist, and I just have to really figure that out. But yeah, so that's where I'm at with those things.
Erica, did you have some reflections or offering?
Oh, yes. Ricky, thank you so much. That was beautiful. I just was reflecting on the collage that is happening between the title, the image, and the text of your work, and how yet again you almost kind of create another medium within the three, and also the sonic aspect of some of your work as well, that I find that just so beautiful to reflect upon. Just so many metaphors just occurring. The idea of pointing to something, I think that it's something that I think about in my work, is the image itself the thing, or is it something else? And I think that you have provided me with some language to support that in my practice. And then just having so many multiple entries to your work as well, this idea that I could come to it without so many of the nuance, just as the culture, there is so many cultural nuances that I can enter the work and then still learn within it as well. I just find it so beautiful to think about all of that space that's happening. And there was this reflection that was happening in one of the images, the plexi on the ground. There was this reflection of your grandmother, and I was just blown away by that. And then just hearing of the show opening at on the weekend of her birthday, and that reflective process. And then I wrote down, what is faith without work? So much to think about. Thank you. I'm just so happy to know you now. I mean, I'm gonna be calling you up, and we're gonna be like having so many more conversations. And Ashara, I'm just so grateful for this, because it's feeding my soul.
Yeah, I'm thankful for both of you. I have such deep gratitude for both of you and your the ways in which you present the conversation around representation, around identity, the metaphor. One of the things that I love so much about kind of the juxtaposition of your work is I feel like I'm in the kitchen with you, Ricky. I always feel like, because you have your silk, wrap on your hair. I just feel like we're having tea and the kids are doing what they're doing. And I feel like I get to be placed in this very intimate space with you. And then when I think about Erica's, your work has been for me so pristine. So like, okay, we're going to sit, I'm going to light you. Your expertise at lighting Blackness, at lighting Black skin, it's like, oh, I get to have both of these experiences with these Black women who are both presenting these constructs of Black identity to me. And there's this dance at the edge. So thank you for both of those ways of us being able to consider ourselves. I have one last question for you, and I want to, before we get to that, I want to kind of do the housekeeping pieces that we need to do around, if you love public programming like this, if you love the Museum of the African Diaspora and all that they have been offering over these last 2 years, these past episodes, you can always watch the episodes on the MOAD YouTube page, and that there's this printed conversation around Blatant that happens as well. And so the next zine that is Blatant comes out in February, comes out for Black History Month next month. And it is a really beautiful zine conversation that offers a love letter to the city of Oakland. The majority of the people who are in this latest edition of the zine, the Blatant zine, are Oakland-based artists who we've come to know and love. So be looking out for that next month. It'll be on sale at the bookstore. So bookstore at the Museum of the African Diaspora, as well as online at our website, Artists First Responder. And I want to invite people to make a donation, to become a member of the museum, to either text right now. You can text 56512 and put in MOAD SF, MOAD SF, and follow the link to make a donation. You can actually hold your phone up to the screen right now if you're watching, and it will take you to the moadsf.org/donate page. And I want us to be very vocal about the importance of supporting Black institutions, Black-led arts, creative, cultural institutions, the importance of that, the importance of us being able to spend our money, on ourselves, and to support the Black aesthetic, and to support institutions that are unapologetically saying, we believe in our own image, we insist that you honor it, and that we love ourselves. So, and with that, I want to thank the partners that have, sponsored the Artists First Responder platform, which co-presents, the Blatant zine, this Blatant forum, and all of the other work that we do, including Black Space Residency. And those partners are AE Creative Consulting Partners, the African American Art and Culture Complex, the Akhenaten Foundation, the Women's Foundation of California, the Walter and Elise Haas Fund, Tau Rising, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, in addition to the Museum of the African Diaspora. So that said, the last question is really about joy. When was the last time you witnessed blatant joy in your life? Whether that be this morning, last week, but what does it mean for you to witness and speak to us about what blatant joy looks like?
I try to activate like genuine joy every morning before I sit down to work, because I deserve it. Like, I am not gonna just wake up and start laboring away. And I talked about this moment a little bit earlier. I found this playlist that I have from, you know how you know people, but you can't keep together how you know them, but like Imani Mixon's The Real Workout playlist. And I was doing my workout and this song came on, and I don't even know the song, but I know it sounds like Detroit. And I just started doing this footwork and I was like, yes, like it just felt so good. I don't know what I was listening to before that, but I was like, you know what? Okay, it's official. I'm ready. I can start my day. And so yeah, that was my joy this morning. I don't know what it's gonna be tomorrow, but
Yeah. Yeah, appreciating today. Ricky, do you have a show coming up? Where's the next place we get to see your work?
So right now, yeah, you're in Detroit, you can like literally go see it. So I have 2 pieces going up at Cranbrook right now, Cranbrook Museum of Art. I have 2 pieces in a group show at David Klein going up. I think that's next week. And then I'm gonna be presenting at Black Portraitures. So
Okay.
excited about that. So yeah.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. Thank you. Erica, when's the last time you experienced blatant joy?
Oh, wow. Vicky, I was so happy that you spoke about music, because I was like, you know what? I have to like have some house music in my life. And I'm like, you know, house music is Black music. Let's never forget that. And so just stomping around, like Spotify has yielded me some wonderful moments. There's a playlist called Track. They're called Track IDs, and they have a whole host of DJs. So I tune into like my Honey Dijon. I'm like Jada G. I'm like gonna get, you know, this like you can listen to like some Carl Cox, like all of these DJs. I'm like DJ Boring. I'm like, if I want some Berlin, I am straight there. Or if I want some kind of smooth, funky, if I want a CC Peniston flashback, see,
Wow. Yes.
you know, I am like right in that place. And then, yeah, like music for me is like, I think probably because I'm craving that connection. I remember, you know, I just remember going to the club and having that free abandon, you know, that journey that the DJ takes you on is just sometimes just all you need to be is in the palm of someone else's hand and just free. And so yeah, and then you know one more music tip. I found there was this remix of a track by Lady Blackbird, and it was like this stomping track, like collage, the amazing vocals. So you know when you hear a vocal on a house track and you're like, wow, like this is like Nina Simone on house.
Nice.
And then the algorithm kicks me out the original, and it was like Nina Simone. It was like, but in the orchestra in one room in the studio, it was that sound.
Can you
And
find it
so,
in the chat so we can all listen? Because I'm like,
yeah,
you know, those of us who were born in the D, we're like, oh, we're here. We're always here for the house track. Always here for it. It's like, bring it. What you got?
okay.
I was definitely gonna text Erica, like, when I get that
we
playlist.
get that? Can we get it? It's like, let's get it.
Okay, so here we go. So the album is Lady Blackbird Acid Jazz House, and that is like this kind of, it's like, you know, musical orchestral. That's in the chat. But the remix, okay, I'm gonna write it in here.
Okay.
If you, so this is like KDA is like this London house producer. This track is stomping, and then listen to the original. And I was like literally, I was shook
I'm getting ready.
I could not believe it.
Before we close the, and so we have to search it because the link didn't actually come in. So put in Lady Black. So what are we going to Spotify to do it?
Oh yeah. Oh, you want me to?
We're
Okay.
gonna play it.
All
Are
right.
we gonna play it right now?
So
Okay.
we could try to go out on it, but you know the thing that happens is that
I'm kidding.
you know how the craziness, the algorithm like finds music that you don't have rights to, and then we'll turn it off. That said,
They'll delete the whole. Yeah, don't even do it.
I'm copying Lady Blackbird Acid Jazz House, and I'm about to put it in my Spotify so I can get it in. And then KDAB, Lady Blackbird Collage. Okay.
Okay, here we go. I found it. Let me see. I mean, this track, I mean, just compared to the original.
Let me see. Put it in there.
Let me see. Let me take these headphones out because I know that. Here we go. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Let me see if I can get this thing going.
Oh, this is dope. This is how we're gonna go out. So I just want to say it's been my joy, my blatant joy to like spend time with you all today, and want to thank the museum for hosting us, and to absolutely thank Dr. Elizabeth Gessel for running tech for us and putting all of this together, for you all joining us for our winter edition. We won't be together again until spring. So you'll have to pay attention to the museum's website, to the calendar page, to find out who will be our next guest on the Blatant Forum on Art, Joy, and Rage, centering the voices of Black women. And it's gonna be good, but it won't be till April, okay? So in the meantime, enjoy all of the rest of the public programming that's happening on the website, and just pour out some water for your revered dead. It's important, you know, that we stay in our body inside of this grief, that we not push it away, that we stay inside of this rage, that we not push it away, and that we stay inside of this bliss and pleasure and joy, and that we not push it away. Like, don't get numb. Don't get numb. Stay present with it. And with that, we got some music to listen to, or?
You know, of course it won't let me play it. It's like Spotify will not let me
Yeah,
play.
exactly. It won't let you play it because here we are in the algorithm. But we're going to go find it. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks everyone for listening in on Facebook, and for RSVPing on Zoom. And I love you. I love you so much. Thank you, Ricky. Thank you, Erica. I'll see you both again soon. Inshallah. Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.